So good afternoon. Today's workshop is going to be on self-care, a very important topic at the moment amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Kim Lombard and I am an occupational therapist who works in the UCD Access and Lifelong Learning Centre. So just to give a kind of an outline about what the session will focus on today is firstly looking at managing life at home and the importance of balance. And obviously this is, as I said a minute ago, particularly important right now in the middle of the pandemic, when all of us are doing pretty much nearly everything at home at the moment. So the next aspect then will be looking at self-care and some self-care strategies. And then also we'll be looking at some resources that are available to help you support self-care during this time. So just jumping into it here. So managing life at home, and once again my slide got squished, but hopefully you guys can see that okay. So managing life at home, the thing about it is that at the moment all of us are having to do, as I said, pretty much nearly everything at home right now. We're studying, we're working, we're sleeping, we're managing family commitments. A lot of us are even kind of socializing at home, be it via Zoom and whatnot. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of demands that are put upon all of us, but right now it's all within the same environment of our home. So your academic demands might be things like going to your lectures or seminars or labs, whatever it is, on a virtual aspect. The personal demands that you may have, so all of the other kind of things we have to do outside of our academic work, about going to appointments or different things like that. The social demands then as well, like I said, all of us are trying to, a lot of the time is socializing on the likes of Zoom and WhatsApp and different things like that too, so it's in a very virtual sphere. The family demands that we may have, particularly being at home all the time, and if you're somebody who maybe has children at home or maybe you have young siblings and things like that, the boundaries between being able to focus on your work and being able to switch off and manage family demands as well can be hard. And the thing that does generally tend to probably take the biggest hit is our own self-care in that regard. And then also financial demands as well, and obviously with the big impact of what's happened this year, or 2020 I should say, all of these demands, if we can imagine, we're like clowns juggling balls, and the problem is that when we have too many balls to juggle, or if some of the balls are too big and they take more effort to juggle them, what we find happens is that we start to maybe drop a few balls. And like I said, one of the first things that actually generally tends to take a big hit is our own self-care. But what this workshop is going to focus on is about why it is important for us to actually prioritize our self-care, particularly coming into these last few weeks of the semester, because that helps manage and juggle all of the rest of the balls that we have going forward. So the importance of balance. The thing is that if, as we know, if the demands pile up, it can really take a toll on both our mental and our physical health, and I'll go into that a little bit further in a minute. But the thing is that looking after both our mental and our physical health is essential for managing our college work and our role of being a student, and all of the other roles that we have to do as well. And the reason why this is because if we're not taking care of ourselves, then we're actually no help to anyone else, really, So taking care of ourselves first, or paying ourselves first, is a really important thing to do to help then manage and be in a good state to manage all of the rest of the demands that we have, such as essays, exams, family demands, all that sort of stuff. So balance between the roles and then the tasks and activities that you have to do for those roles will help you look after your mental and your physical health. So what we mean by that is that the thing about the balance, I suppose, is that unfortunately there's no perfect formula for what is balance in our day-to-day life. What is work-life balance? I'm sure you probably have heard that term thrown around a good bit too. Unfortunately, there's no formula that says we need to account for X amount of hours to this role and X amount of hours to that role, and so on and so forth. But like I said, what happens is that when sometimes at different points throughout the year when the demands pile up, let's say the next few weeks as we're coming towards the end of term, your essays and your exams and stuff are all coming at you. Generally speaking, what I find happens for students is that we kind of completely throw self-care out the window. So we might sacrifice a bit of sleep, or we might start eating really irregularly or not eating well, and we may not exercise as much, and particularly right now when going outside our house is is unusual, in comparison to what it was like before. That actually can really lead to the likes of burnout, and then it makes it hard for you to be able to do all of the things that you have to do, such as essays and exams and so on and so forth. So this is why actually taking the time and prioritizing self-care is so important, and I'll go into that a little bit further now. So self-care, what is it? When people say, what is self-care, I suppose? So self-care refers to activities that allow you to take care of your physical and your mental health and well-being. So it's not just about, people may think that like sleep and exercise and stuff is important for our physical health, but they are equally, if not actually more important, for managing our mental health as well. So there's a couple of elements that you can look at with self-care. So firstly is rest and relaxation. The next one then is sleep, which the reason why we have that as a separate one to rest and relaxation is because it is such an important element by itself. Exercise then, just being able to move our body in some capacity. Personal hygiene, eating, and then dressing ourselves. So actually just getting up and being in different clothes and so on and so forth. So why is self-care important then? There's a few elements of it about why it's important. Firstly is that it maintains positive mental well-being, as I said before. It also helps revitalize and re-energize to support achievement in the other kind of demands that we have. So what I like to describe this as is that we need to have productive rest in order to have productive study, or we need to have productive rest and relaxation time in order to be productive in the other things that require our energy and attention. You know what I'm trying to say? It's kind of like a battery that we have, and if we completely deplete the battery, then we're not going to be able to concentrate or be able to study or write our essays or attend to relationships and things like that. Whereas if we keep that battery topped up by engaging in self-care, kind of recharging the battery of our car or something like that, it will allow you more energy and more resilience, I suppose, towards approaching all of the rest of the things that you have to do. So this is why self-care, engaging with it, particularly, as I said, for these last few weeks of term as well, is really, really important. It also helps prevent exhaustion and potential for mental health difficulties and the likes of burnout as well. So obviously you could say that those two things are the same. So what I mean by that is that it keeps us well, but it also prevents exhaustion. But the thing is that there is a correlation between engaging in self-care activities on a regular basis and being in a positive mental state, and then also the lack of self-care, what that can lead to, and how our mental health can take a bit of a hit because of that. So lack of self-care reduces our ability then in our day-to-day lives to be attentive. And that's attentive to lectures and content that we have to learn in college and everything, but also attentive with, let's say, our personal relationships or our relationships with our classmates, our family, so on and so forth. It also reduces our ability to be present. So what happens is that when we don't engage in self-care, we can get more stressed and we can get more worrisome about the future, what's going to happen, different things like that, or we're worried about things that happened in the past. Engaging in more self-care brings us more into the present moment. Then also it reduces our ability to be compassionate if we're really not engaging in self-care, because it's, as I said earlier, we have to pay ourselves first. So we have to take care of ourselves in order to be compassionate and take care of other people too. And then also thoughtful as well. So as you can see, engaging in self-care is very, very important. And like I said, there's no magic formula for how many hours or how many things we should be doing to engage with self-care. It's something that we have to kind of gauge for ourselves every single day. So what are the signs to watch out for which may indicate that maybe you're not engaging in as much self-care, and maybe you do need to prioritize it a little bit more? So a few of the signs that might come up are things like unable to concentrate for a prolonged period of time. So if you find that you're sitting down at the desk and your mind is racing, or you kind of feel that you go into a little bit of a trance state as well, not actually being able to concentrate on what you're doing is a really, really big indicator that actually your brain is overwhelmed with stuff right now, and it needs a bit of a break. It needs some rest. Particularly if you find that you're being irritable with other people as well. It's kind of like, when you have let's say a very small toddler and they haven't had their afternoon nap and they're giving out and they're throwing tantrums and all this sort of stuff. And a lot of the time it's just if they actually go and have their nap, they're totally fine. The little demon comes out. So I suppose the point of this is saying, obviously not in the same capacity, but as adults, we can kind of be short or irritable with other people if we haven't been able to take care of ourselves as well. Then also it can lead to low motivation and then lack of interest as well. So the problem is that if we throw ourselves, particularly into our academics, too much and don't kind of pace ourselves, we can kind of, just like the battery depleting, we can kind of lose the motivation or the interest in order to engage with the rest of the stuff we have to do. So we want to make sure that our motivation and interest levels stay up throughout the semester so that it's easier to engage with the work. But to do that, we need to pace ourselves and engage with self-care. It can lead to increased levels of anxiety as well. Also low mood or mood swings as well, some people can experience. Another one then is difficulty sleeping, and this is a really, really big one that sometimes people can kind of put down to, oh, it's just a bad night's sleep or something like that. But actually looking back over a week or 2 weeks or maybe even longer, and actually think to yourself, how has my sleep been? Have I found it very hard to fall asleep? Am I waking up a lot during the night? Different things like that. Sleeping is, and I'll go into it in a little bit further, but sleeping is so important for keeping up our self-care and maintaining good mental health. So difficulty sleeping can be a really big indicator of if maybe self-care is something that's lacking in your routine. Another thing then is a loss of appetite or a lack of routine regarding meals. So you might experience where you might work all day and then you realize you haven't eaten all day, or you might find that you're overeating as well, or going for foods maybe that you wouldn't usually go for due to convenience, or just because you feel you need like a sugar rush or something like that. So those are some of the other signs, but some of the physical signs that you might experience, so physically in your body as well, are things like fatigue. Fatigue can be a really big one, particularly in college students, that once again, just like the difficulty with sleeping, it might actually not be picked up very easily. And the thing about fatigue, and the reason why it's different to tiredness, is that tiredness responds to sleep. So when we're tired, we go to bed, actually most of the time we might fall asleep quite easily, and then when we wake up the next morning we are quite refreshed and we're more full of energy. Whereas fatigue is a bit different. Fatigue is kind of a more complex phenomenon which doesn't actually respond to sleep very well. So you might go to bed, you might be tired and fatigued, but you wake up and you still feel fatigued. So the thing about fatigue is that we actually have to incorporate, it's not just sleeping that is something that we need to look at. We actually have to look at incorporating pacing and other self-care strategies throughout the day to help manage the fatigue overall. Other things then could be hair loss or the likes of migraines or headaches, and particularly right now with looking at a screen all the time, this can be particularly hard to manage. So that's why, as I said, now more than ever, self-care is so important for all of us to engage with. And then the likes of weight loss or weight gain, and then also a gaunt appearance. So what's important is just to be conscious of these signs and take notice of them. And if you do notice any of these, a few of them or one or two of them happening, checking with yourself to say, right, actually, what have I been doing over the last few days that maybe has led me to this? Is it that I'm sacrificing a bit of my sleep to stay up longer? And maybe I haven't gotten a break throughout the day, or maybe I've been doing work for 4 hours straight and I haven't actually been taking a break and eating properly. So what can I do to look after my health and well-being? So the first three obviously are some of probably you've probably heard them many a time, but eating well, sleeping and exercise. So the thing about it is that, as we know, particularly when, let's say, deadlines are looming and you've a lot of work and things like that, and maybe your stress levels are going up, we do tend to maybe reach for more sugary or caffeinated food or more processed food. And actually this only kind of exacerbates the issue, because those things are a bit more, they give you energy for maybe a little bit of time, but you can kind of find a bit of a crash happens afterwards. So trying to limit your sugar, caffeine and processed food intake is really important. And one thing, particularly coming into the next few weeks as we are approaching the end of the trimester, one thing that I suggest students try to do is to try bulk or like bulk meal prep for the week. So you might chuck a load of vegetables into a pot with some stock, cook it away and blend it all, and then you have a nice bit of soup that you can just take a little bit of, a little cupful of, every single afternoon for your lunch or something like that. And you don't need to expend any more energy trying to prepare new things or trying to figure out all that sort of stuff, which means that we'd be less likely to reach for those foods that do have high sugar, caffeine or processed food content in them. So yes, absolutely, we do have to store it properly, definitely, because if we don't store it properly, then that is like a whole week's worth of soup that has been completely gone. So yes, absolutely, we do have to store it. Absolutely don't want food, yeah, exactly, don't want food poisoning at all. That's absolutely self-care 101. Don't give yourself food poisoning with it either. So the next thing then with exercise, obviously I realize here it says the gym, which I appreciate is these slides were made prior to pandemic, but the thing about exercise, it doesn't necessarily need to be a very kind of very intense thing, or you have to go to like a 6-week program or something. You don't have to do any of that, but actually just trying to get out or moving in some capacity a few times a week is really important. And think of it this way: when we are on campus, or even just when we are in our regular daily lives, we are getting up, we're going to the bus, we're getting into college, or we might be cycling or walking or whatever, and we're moving from place to place a lot. Whereas now a lot of us, I would assume, are sitting in one place for a long period of time during the day, particularly if we have lectures and so on and so forth to manage during the day. So actually the movement that naturally would occur in our routine isn't happening as easily now. And we actually do have to put a bit more effort into to kind of get movement back into our routine. So what I suggest sometimes students do is to actually think about building in a commute, right? So by that I mean, it could be that before college in the morning or before you start your work, you go for a 10-minute walk around the block, and that's your commute. You might make yourself a cup of coffee, maybe decaffeinated, considering I said lack of caffeine in the previous point, but you might make yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, walk it around the block for 10 minutes, and then that's your commute. You've gotten a little bit of movement into your day. And then at the end of your day, go for another commute, go for another walk around the block and things like that. Even things like if you have a dog, walking the dog, which I'm sure all the dogs are absolutely loving right now with all of us being at home. Or doing, let's say, some virtual classes. I know UCD Sports and Fitness are doing virtual classes on their Facebook page. So it's just more so looking back, and because the benefits of it are not just physical, it's from a mental health well-being aspect as well. So then from sleep then, like I said a minute ago, like difficulty sleeping can be a really big indicator that that we're kind of lacking in self-care. So obviously, like with sleeping, it's kind of 7 to 9 hours. It really depends on the person. Like there's some people who can sleep for longer than that, and that's what they need, and some people who maybe only need 7 hours, different things like that. But I think what's important is that think about how much time you need to have a good night's sleep, and then don't forget to add an extra kind of half an hour on that, so for like a sleep window for you to actually fall asleep. Because the problem is that we say, right, okay, I need 7.5 hours sleep, or I need 8 hours sleep, for example, and we get into bed with 8 hours before our alarm is to go off, or less sometimes. We're not giving ourselves time to actually fall asleep as well and get the full 8 hours that we need. So this is why it's important, is to establish how long you feel you need for a good night's sleep, add an extra kind of half an hour or hour, however long you feel you need to fall asleep. And that's the time, then work backwards that way. And that's the time that you should be getting into bed to be able to have a very good full night's rest before the next day. So often we don't give ourselves enough of a window to sleep. We might give ourselves enough hours for the full night's sleep, but we take half an hour or an hour to fall asleep, and we're losing that from actually being asleep. So the other thing then is sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene, you're probably like, what is that? But essentially, sleep hygiene is all about how we manage our sleep environment and getting prepared for sleep, and getting our bodies kind of ready for it. There's a couple of aspects here that we need to think about. First and foremost is the environment in which we're sleeping in. I really appreciate that being and doing everything at home has really thrown up a lot, or has blurred the boundaries, I should say, around where we sleep, where we study, where we do anything, where we relax. And that obviously can have a really big issue or impact on our sleep. Sure, my bed is like outside that door, so like it really can have a really big impact. We're sleeping in our college environment, I suppose. So the thing about it is that, if at all possible, if you are studying in your bed, I really, really would strongly encourage you to try not do that, and to try find another space in your home, preferably outside of your bedroom, that you can study in. I know that's not possible for some people because of the circumstances that we're in right now, but if at all possible, where you just don't do any other things in your bed, keep your bed purely for sleeping. And the reason why is because psychologically, we associate certain environments with certain activities. So our brains associate your bed with getting sleepy and falling asleep. Whereas, I mean, like, I know we might get sleepy elsewhere on like a warm, sitting on the couch in the evening, and it's nice and warm around the place. But what I'm trying to say is that we want to make sure that it doesn't blur the lines anymore for our brain. So if you're studying and chatting to your friends, or on phone or whatever, in bed as well, it makes it very hard for your brain to associate that that's the place where you fall asleep. So trying to keep that place sacred for sleep is really important. There's also a few other things that can help with your environment, such as having a cooler environment. Our body temperature actually does need to drop a little bit in order to fall asleep, so having a more cool environment is important. And then trying to have it as dark as possible. It is important to try keep us to try get a good deep sleep, I suppose. Then the other thing to think about is the routine that you have prior to bed. So I'm actually going to bring up the example of the toddler again. And you're probably thinking I'm saying that we all need to treat ourselves like toddlers, but that's actually kind of what I'm saying. Is with a young child or a toddler, we don't play with them and then put them into bed and expect them to go to sleep straight away. There's a routine that we have to do to wind them down in order to fall asleep. So obviously it's getting into your pajamas and brushing your teeth and all sort of stuff. But then there's an element of reading a story and all sort of stuff to wind a child down from being very, very active to winding down to getting into a sleepy mode. The problem with us now as adults is that we expect ourselves to be able to go from doing something very active to being able to fall asleep straight away. And actually our brains work exactly the same as the toddlers in that regard. We need space to unwind and to relax before we can do that. So if you, let's say particularly going forward, if we have essays and stuff due, if you're working on that essay right until, let's say, 11 or half 11, and then you get up and go try to get straight into bed, good luck to you trying to go to sleep that quickly, because our brains are too stimulated. So making sure it doesn't need to be like 2 hours long, but making sure there's just a little bit of time before going to bed that allows you to kind of try wind down, do something that will calm you down. It could be, it could be getting the place prepared for the next morning. It could be getting into pajamas and doing some yoga moves, or watching something that maybe doesn't have too bright a light on it, different things like that. It's just to give you a little bit of extra time so that your body can unwind as you come towards sleep. So managing fatigue then. So there's, as I said earlier, the fatigue is something that doesn't respond well to sleep, because actually fatigue is an ongoing thing that we, it's not that it doesn't respond at all to it, but it's that there's other things that we need to do during our day in order to help manage the fatigue, so that it is easier for us to fall asleep and we actually are energized the next day. So the first thing is to try set up your environment. So by that I mean it's trying to set up, let's say, a space. Let's say if you're studying, trying to have everything you need there, and kind of knowing what needs to go where, different things like that. And like I said, trying to have a separate environment for, let's say, sleeping and relaxing or whatever from your study space. So having a little UCD space or something like that is really important there. The next thing, which is something that is really, really important for managing fatigue, is pacing ourselves. So like I said earlier, we might have loads of assignments and stuff coming up and we kind of throw ourselves into all of it, but the problem is that really increases the likelihood of us burning out. So we might actually burn out, by, we have 4 assignments to do, and by the middle of the second one we're already burnt out because we haven't actually paced ourselves and built in some breaks and different things like that. So making sure that we are pacing ourselves throughout the day, but then also throughout the semester. So giving ourselves a few days off where necessary, let's say over weekends or something. Even during the day, making sure you have breaks built in throughout your day so that you can look at have intensive productive time, but then also intensive relaxation time where you can kind of switch off on things and then recharge that battery. The next thing then is knowing your limits. And I think this is a really important one, because sometimes, for example, let's say if we have an MCQ exam, or even the exams that are coming up that we have to study for, and we have X amount of, let's say we have 10 lectures that we have to get through or something like that, and you say, right, I have to get through 5 of them today or whatever it is, and actually we try force ourselves to keep going with something, even if the information isn't going into our brain anymore. Let's say we've been studying for an hour and a half or something like that, and no more information is going into our brain. Our brain is completely saturated, it's completely exhausted. A lot of the times we might find that we push ourselves to keep going. So we might say, no, but I have to get stuff done, so I'm just going to keep sitting down and keep going with it. That's really, really detrimental, not just to your health, but also just for our time. It's not good use of your time. So knowing what your limit is and saying, right, okay, I know that I can probably concentrate for maybe 30 minutes at a time, or maybe even if it's 20 minutes or even 10 minutes, that's okay. But actually being realistic and saying, right, I'm going to do, let's say, 15 minutes of work, and then I'm going to take a break for 5 minutes. I'm going to come back to it. And knowing your limits and pacing yourself like that. It just means that it allows you to kind of check in with yourself and say, have I taken on too much right now, or am I trying to do too much, or am I trying to push myself too much? And just take a little bit of a break then. And because, like I said, we do not want people burning out. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I think that's what's important to remember, is that it's a marathon, not a sprint with it. And then anticipate the difficulties. So the thing about it is that, look, I know we can't, none of us even predicted we would be in this state or in this lockdown this time last year. We all thought it was only going to be 2 weeks. So sometimes we can't anticipate absolutely everything, of course, that's life. But what we can do is to try and anticipate what the next few weeks are going to look like and what sort of things could help out. So for example, taking out your timetable and looking at the deadlines you have over the coming weeks, and you might find that, oh, I actually have 3 deadlines that are due on the very last day of term, for example. They're all due and they're all 2,000 words or something like that. And you're like, oh, Jesus, that's actually a lot of work to try and get done, you know, and they're all due at the same time. So saying to yourself now, okay, which one actually could I try and get done first? And maybe I'll pull my own personal deadline a little bit earlier. I might get that one done the week before that or something like that. It's kind of trying to looking at the next few weeks ahead and anticipating what sort of things could be difficult to manage and trying to put some strategies in place now to help. Another thing that can be useful here is also kind of engaging with the social support at home. So by that I mean, let's say if you know that you have exams coming up in a couple of weeks' time, in May time, and you know you really it's going to be a stressful time for you, and you don't really, you know, you're not really sure how it's going to go. Maybe talking to your family or your housemates and kind of looking at what kind of support they can give you. So for example, is there certain times of the day that they kind of need to leave you alone to make sure that you have time to study on stuff? Can you guys look at bulk prepping, you know, a big pot of chili or something like that, so that you have ready meals to eat at that time, and it's just all you have to do is pop it out of the freezer. Think as a family or as a household with your housemates about what sort of things can we do to kind of prepare for the next few weeks so that it's a little bit easier for us to manage. And then also scheduling breaks, rest and relaxation. So we're all absolutely brilliant at scheduling when we need to do work and when we have our lectures and all that sort of stuff. But we are absolutely awful at scheduling actual breaks and rest and relaxation. So like I said, we need productive relaxation in order to engage with productive work. So actually building that into your routine on a regular basis, saying to yourself, right, I know I have this bit of my essay I have to do today, but I'm gonna have my limit of, you know, 8 p.m. tonight, and at 8 p.m. I'm going to go take a bath or whatever it is that you wanted to do. It's making sure that that's what balance is saying, right, these are the activities that I have to do, these are the self-care strategies I'm going to employ, and schedule them in to help manage that and pace myself throughout the week. So rest and relaxation, then coming on to that, just looking at what are the impacts of not engaging in rest and relaxation. But just bear in mind, I'm not saying that everyone has to rest and relax, you know, 24/7, because the problem is that then we won't get anything done. But what I'm trying to say is reasonable amounts of rest and relaxation throughout our day that are on a regular basis. So instead of saying I'm going to just push for the next few weeks and I'm not going to do any self-care and it'll be fine because once the next few weeks are over, I'll take care of myself then. Unfortunately, it can be done, but the problem is that it's really not good for our mental health. So trying to input rest and relaxation, like little injections throughout the day, that's what it is really, really important. So the impacts of not engaging with rest and relaxation, firstly, is impaired memory, which obviously is really, really important, because when we're trying to study for exams, we want to obviously remember the information that we're studying. And if we don't have enough rest and relaxation or not taking care of ourselves, our memory is impaired. And sure enough, like I said, the information isn't even going in anyway. So this is what I mean by it's important in order for us to actually engage with our study properly, we need to be able to switch off from the stuff as well. The next thing is the poor concentration. And like we said earlier, that's probably one of the bigger signs, or the biggest signs that you might find, is poor concentration on the tasks you have to do. A lowered stress threshold. So the thing about it is that stress to a certain point actually is useful, and that's called O-stress. So it's productive stress. And because if we didn't have any stress at all, none of us would do anything, right? So none of us would be getting out of bed or anything, you know, with nothing to do, we wouldn't have the motivation, I suppose, to go get up and do the things that we have to do. Obviously, when we have too much stress, that's called distress. So that's when we have too much to manage and it's actually overwhelming. And the problem is that let's say, for example, if you're in a rest and relax state in comparison to a state where maybe you haven't been able to rest and relax, you're very highly stressed at the time. The same event could happen. You know, let's say, I don't know, the washing machine pipe bursts and your kitchen floods or something like that. Okay, actually, that's quite a stressful example to give. But something might happen, and not being in the kind of rest and relax state really lowers our stress threshold, so we get stressed easier. That's what I'm trying to say. Whereas if we are able to switch off and take care of ourselves a little bit more, our threshold for stress is a lot higher. So it means that we're able to manage the stressful things that are kind of coming at us, or like I said, manage the balls that we're trying to juggle a little bit more. The next one then is reduce sociability and optimism. So this can really be a big one, is that, you know, we might find that we start to kind of withdraw from engaging with other people if we're kind of not really engaging in self-care, because like I said, we need to pay ourselves first, look after ourselves first, in order to help with managing those relationships, because managing relationships, it is energy reducing, you know, like there's a lot of energy that goes into that, and particularly if we're not looking after ourselves, then it could really be hard to manage other relationships as well. And then also optimism, so our kind of outlook on life and stuff can really take a turn or take a toll if we're not engaging in rest and relaxation. And then also from like a physiological perspective, there's changes in vital signs and tissue repair. So this actually is very much related to the stress here. That is no problem at all. Do not worry. The recording is going to be going up online anyway. So thanks very much, Sean. All right. Thanks a mil. So just come back to this with change in the vital signs and tissue repair. The thing about it is that we, you know, with the lowered stress levels, our bodies need to be able to respond to stress and to repair itself pretty much with it. And the problem is that if we're not giving ourselves a break or kind of engaging in rest and relaxation, it's much harder for our bodies to be able to do that. So changes in vital signs might be the likes of like an increased heart rate. You know, we might get anxious, our breathing might increase, different things like that. So what are some strategies that may help with incorporating some rest and relaxation? So obviously you can do some kind of leisure activities such as reading or painting or whatever it is, if that's what you enjoy. But looking at some kind of relaxation exercises that are specific to this is important. So the first one is deep breathing. So deep breathing, the best thing about it is that it can be done anywhere. And what's great is that, like I said, done anywhere, nobody knows that you're doing it most of the time. And what method I suggest is students use one that says the 4-7-8 method. So that's where you inhale through your nose for 4, you hold it for 7, and then you exhale through your mouth for 8. So I'm going to try it right now. I'm going to get everyone to just, in their own time, I'll count you down and we'll go, just breathe along with me as you do it. So ready? Inhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And by doing that a few times, the point of it is that it regulates our vital signs, or our heart rate actually, and our breathing rate, and it gets more oxygen into our system and starts to calm us down. So doing it a couple of times, you know, I have students who, when they go to exams, they might write 4-7-8 on it, or they'll put a post-it note on their laptop if they're doing a Brightspace exam or something, just to remind them to breathe. It's really important. The next thing then is mindfulness. So mindfulness is kind of an activity that people are kind of like, I don't have time to do that. But the point of mindfulness actually is that it's all of the time that we can be mindful. So a useful strategy that you can do is, I suppose the point of mindfulness is to ground ourselves in the present moment. So a useful strategy is to do the 5 kind of step method, which is where you identify at any given moment 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can feel, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And the reason why we do this is, and yes, we do all have a taste in our mouth at any given moment. It can sometimes be hard to identify it, but the point of it is to be more conscious and more aware about our surroundings, so that it's it's easier to ground ourselves in it, and to not worry so much about the future. So it's kind of more being in the present moment and not letting the world kind of pass us by like that. The next one then is progressive muscular relaxation, and this is kind of what it says in the name. So it's progressively relaxing muscle groups, essentially. So YouTube have some really good guided meditations for progressive muscular relaxation, and this is a really useful way of relaxing your body, particularly as you get into bed. So it's quite a good one for kind of overall getting your body very relaxed as we're getting into bed. So what it involves is tensing muscle groups for a short amount of time, a few seconds, and then releasing them. So you might start from your toes up to your calves, to your stomach, your shoulders, your hands, your arms, and you might work your whole way up your body. And the point of it is to progressively tense and then release the muscle groups, and it just really relaxes your body. And then the last one then is kind of guided meditation. So obviously there's loads of different kind of apps and stuff that can be useful. One of them is the Headspace app. And I think there's like 10 meditations that you can get for free. Now you can keep going over them as many times as you like. And YouTube also have loads of guided meditations if you would prefer to have kind of a guide to walk you through doing it. So the last thing I wanted to kind of mention here is that we have also put together a short video. It's only about 5 minutes long, for kind of minding your mental health, particularly for further strategies, and particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you just search the YouTube channel Occupational Therapy Resources, you should find it there. There's this one on minding your mental health. There's also one on developing kind of a study space and a relaxation space at home, and then also managing your routine and developing a routine while working from home during COVID-19 pandemic. So that is pretty much everything for today's workshop. So I'm just going to stop the recording here. There we go. Okay.